Welcome to my senior capstone presentation, Resonance, a Classroom Architecture Project. My name is Clark Devore. In this presentation, we will cover why this topic matters, the people involved, the research, and the design guidelines that came from that research, the process that I experienced in creating this project. We'll go through the equipment list and the equipment designed for this project. Then we will see a case study classroom, the ideal classroom, and the conclusion for this project. Why does this matter? It matters because 3 to 5% of school-aged children will have some form of central auditory processing disorder, a hearing sensitivity that can inhibit one's ability to properly analyze and discriminate auditory input. These children are easily overwhelmed with noise and are likely to experience low self-esteem and other behavioral issues. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 2.8% of school-aged children are expected to exhibit a type of autism spectrum disorder, expressed through hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to tactile, visual, and auditory input. These children are likely to experience difficulty in communication and social interaction. And according to the National Library of Medicine, 3 to 5% of school-aged children are expected to show signs of a type of sensory processing disorder. In their own words, this can be described as difficulty detecting, modulating, interpreting, and/or responding to sensory experiences. The people involved in this project are the students, teachers, and parents. The students with sensory disorders experience a reduced quality of education. They face many challenges that their neurotypical classmates do not experience, leading them to feel isolated. Next, the teachers. Whether this individual is an intervention specialist or a traditional subject teacher, their job is to help their students learn and grow. These teachers need a supportive atmosphere where students feel safe and welcomed. And finally, the parents. The parents of intervention students want their children to have access to good quality education. Parents know that school is a vital part of a child's social development. Students with sensory disorders often struggle with social interactions and have emotional challenges. These user personas will give us a better understanding of the people I am targeting in this project. This is Emily. She is a high school intervention specialist. Emily works with special needs students. She knows her students enjoy working in different positions, and she notices improved work ethic when her students are able to work together. Emily's pain points is that her students are easily distracted, tired, and bored in her classroom. Her classroom receives little natural sunlight, and noise from adjacent classrooms bothers her special needs students. The goal for Emily is for her students to have access to a place where they can feel safe, they can recover from sensory overload, and focus on their work. Let's look at an intervention student. This is Colin. He is 16 years old and he has been diagnosed with central auditory processing disorder. This means that he struggles with sound sensitivity, sound localization, and sound discrimination. Colin's pain points is that he struggles to maintain attention in class. Noisy environments are physically exhausting for him, and he must wait until after school to begin his homework. The goal for Colin is a place that allows him to get more homework done during school hours so that he has more free time outside of class. Finally, let's look at Hannah. She is a 17-year-old intervention student who has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. This means that she struggles with social communication and social interaction, and classrooms can be frightening and confusing for her. Hannah's pain points is that she struggles with visual and tactile sensitivity. She is easily overwhelmed with too much sensory stimulation. She often feels distant from learning, and this leads her to feel isolated from her classmates. Hannah's goal would be to find an environment with less social isolation that makes it easier to collaborate with her friends and classmates. Now, I do want to recognize that there are some current solutions out there. Specialized schools are a great opportunity for students with emotional, physical, and severe learning disabilities. The schools listed on the right are examples of schools here in Columbus. They are not a good fit for higher functioning students. Intervention students in traditional education systems can apply for accommodations for their specific learning disabilities. However, their schools may not have a dedicated location that meets their physical needs. The target audience of this project are high-functioning autistic and hearing-impacted students who do not have physical abnormalities or are in need of special academic curriculums, but struggle to function in normal classroom environments. Therefore, the purpose of this project is to develop a classroom that eliminates distractions that affect students with auditory and visual sensory disorders. Now let's move into the research portion of my project. I started with secondary research. This included studying academic previewed articles and school websites to learn about intervention programs. I visited manufacturers' websites to learn about their products and specifications. I referenced trusted architectural sources to understand how to design environments for others. I had the opportunity to interview multiple teaching specialists involved in special needs education. The programs involved were Cedarville University, Bethel University, and Genoa Christian Academy. I also had the opportunity to visit some of these schools as part of my research. New Story Schools is a specialized learning center. Beaver Creek High School. I visited their program because they have a sensory room. And Genoa Christian Academy, whom I partnered with to re-envision their intervention room, which I will talk about more later. During my research, I curated a list of design guidelines that can be broken down into 3 categories. First, specific to my project and to my target audience, are a flexible work environment, good lighting, minimal distractions, and a calming place for my intervention students. Next are the relevant guidelines that would be beneficial for all students in academic environments. These include good circulation, muted colors, biophilic design, and supportive seating. And finally, general guidelines that should be part of any classroom design. These elements include a healthy learning environment, an environment that promotes social interaction, and a stimulating environment. The trajectory of this project saw several changes. The original intention was to create a case study and focus on a single school and renovate their intervention room or look at adding one. When I encountered difficulties in finding a school to work with, the idea came up that this could be a package or a concept that could be offered and implemented in schools as part of their intervention program. At the last moment, however, I found a school to work with. The school provided a great opportunity to conduct a case study and re-envision their intervention room. I decided that this project would do both so that you could see the concept and a practical application of that concept. This concept necessitated a brand. This is some of the ideation from my brand name and logo. I chose Resonance initially because I was focused on students with hearing disorders. I came to realize that the dual meaning of the word resonance aligned with the meaning of my project. Resonance refers to the qualities and characteristics of sound waves, hence why the shape is inspired by a tuning fork. Resonance is related to the word resonant, which is used to describe an enrichment or improvement. The goal of this project is to improve the experience of intervention students. This became my chosen brand name and logo. Next, this brand needed a consistent style. So here we have the mood board and materials listing for the classroom. I wanted to include wood as a natural element and chose white oak. The carpet is from the Carpet Tile Depot. It is a premium grade carpet that should hold up to classroom use. The paint is from PPG Paints. They provided very helpful recommendations for autistic-friendly colors. Now we have the equipment list, which is part of every architectural program. I wanted to draw attention to it because the selections make a significant impact. These ceiling tiles will reduce noise from the equipment above the drop-down ceiling, such as heating and air conditioning, and dampen noise from within the room. These correlated color temperature adjustable lights eliminate the flickering of fluorescent bulbs and meet the 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin ideal for staying conditions. The Revelation sky ceiling can eliminate feelings of claustrophobia, reduce stress and anxiety, and enhance well-being. The Hush acoustic tiles reduce excessive noise. They are made from cork, and their shape deflects sound waves and reflect it through the tile. These wall dividers are made of compressed wool and help to capture sound as they echo through a space. And next, the vertical writing surfaces. I feared that traditional whiteboards might be difficult for some students to view due to the high contrast of a white background with a bright colored marker. And for seating recommendations, on the left we have the rocking chairs from Zuma. They were specifically developed for students that need to expand energy. The chairs allow them to rock quietly in their classrooms. And on the right, we have the therapy rocker from TFH Special Needs Toys. These chairs offer a gentle rocking motion that gives students vestibular stimulation. The durable vinyl makes them ideal for school settings. During my research, there were a few items I struggled to find and eventually designed them myself as part of the resonance package. The first was a suitable desk. The other item was a clock. Let's start with the desk. Here are the design drivers for the desk, starting with removable dividers. Dividers are a great way to minimize distractions from those working at adjacent desks. Most desks either have permanent dividers or lightweight temporary dividers. I wanted dividers that could be optional features. Tilting desks are becoming more popular in schools. However, the entire surface tilts. Not having a flat surface for items such as beverages and writing tools can be very inconvenient. I wanted to incorporate a tilting surface for writing while maintaining a fixed surface for items that can roll. And finally, I wanted to have a place for the backpack. Removing clutter lightens the mental load of students in a classroom. A common source of clutter are backpacks lying around on the floor in a disorganized manner. I wanted the desk to help students organize their space by giving them a place to store their backpacks. Here's my ideation for the desk. And this is the resonance writing desk, modeled in SolidWorks and rendered in KeyShot. The hardware came from McMaster-Carr. This view shows the underside of the desk, with the hook for students to hang their backpack on and the tilting mechanism. I had to develop a new latch mechanism because the methods used for most drafting tables would not apply to this desk due to the fold-away dividers and the fixed horizontal surface. This design utilizes a drawbar that requires both hands to pull. I specifically wanted it to be a two-handed operation because it would eliminate the possibility of the users accidentally getting their fingers caught on the sides or unintentionally tilting the desk. This view shows the modularity of the desk, the writing surfaces in different positions, and the fold-away dividers. During my research, I found that standing desks could be beneficial for some students, as some students struggle to sit still and function better when standing. All standing desks need to be adjustable because the ideal standing position is different for each user. This desk allows students to stand still while having access to the tilting surface as seen on the previous desk. One of the big inspirations for this standing desk was the Steady Corral. Steady Corrals give students an opportunity to close off outside distractions and narrow their focus to a smaller area. These desks are intended to be positioned along walls to remove students from activity at the center of the classroom. Most steady corrals are perpendicular to the wall, but I wanted to improve the visibility, so I played around with angles to improve the visibility to the front of the classroom. This is the resonance standing desk. As with the previous desk, it was modeled in SolidWorks, rendered in KeyShot, and utilizes hardware from McMaster-Carr. This view displays how the 20-degree angle improves visibility to the front of the classroom while still providing privacy from students on either side. As seen on the previous desk, this gives students a comfortable writing position. As with all standing desks, there is a height adjustment. This allows users to move the desk to a comfortable standing or seating position. I started to wonder about the role the clock plays in classrooms during my research for this project. The first driver was that the clock included analog and digital methods. Many students today struggle to tell time using an analog clock. Intervention students can struggle with executive functioning and need extra help in maintaining their schedule. Displaying both analog and digital clocks allows students to build a connection between digital and analog time telling. Another important driver was to have a low contrast screen. Some students on the autism spectrum disorder struggle with high contrast, such as black text on a white piece of paper. This was going to use the same screen as the Kindle reading device, which is an e-ink screen. While these screens are good for your eyes, the limited monotone colors and slow refresh rates make them a poor fit for my clock design. Therefore, I am using an LCD screen with a blue light blocking and anti-glare screen protector. Although the clock is an essential element to the classroom, there are times when it may be distracting. That's when I realized that the clock needed to be teacher-controlled. Teachers are given control of the interface to determine what display is best for their classroom and when to have the display turned on. During my ideation for the clock, I knew early on that I wanted to build the connection between analog and digital time. Some research on how teachers teach their young students to tell time indicated that I needed to help students visualize time. This is the Resonance Classroom Clock. It was modeled in SolidWorks, rendered in KeyShot, with some touch-ups done in Procreate. These are the 4 display options available to the teacher. Let's take a closer look at the calendar. The days of the week and the days of the month slowly fill in with a darker color as time progresses. Here is the analog-only screen. The darkened portion between 2 and 3 o'clock helps students to visualize that time is taking place between the 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock hours. The minute indicators are filled in with green each time a minute passes. As students learn to tell time, they can determine the minutes by adding up the number of filled-in indicators. This is the digital time display. This is the combined screen. Notice that the minute hand on the analog clock is the same color as the minute digits on the digital clock, and the hour hand is the same color as the hour digits on the digital clock. Now that you are familiar with the Resonance package, let's take a closer look at it in a case study. This is Genoa Christian Academy, based in Westerville, Ohio. This is the floor plan for their recently constructed 65,000 square foot Upper Academy building. In room 172 on the first floor is the current intervention room. This is the current intervention room. There's not much to distinguish it from normal classrooms. The far right image shows a folding partition wall that gives way to this room. This wall can be removed to open up to the entire classroom. The intervention services do not always have access to this room, however. Here is my floor plan ideation, and what became my final floor plan. I took that expansion room and turned it into a sensory room. Here is the classroom you saw before, but fitted with the Resonance package. Here is the architectural program for the Genoa Christian Academy intervention room. The total square footage is just under 1,000 square feet. This is the front of the classroom. I added some additional storage for the teachers. This view shows the entrance from the hallway, along with the entrance to the new sensory room. I decided to remove the folding partition wall and install a permanent wall instead. This view shows the artificial skylight and a place for students to prep their meals should they decide to have their lunches in this room. This is taken inside the new sensory room. Students have privacy curtains available to use as they recover from sensory overload. This door would be an emergency exit only. The primary entrance for students will be through the classroom. Here is an isometric view of the classroom. Now let's take a look at circulation diagrams. We will revisit the user personas from earlier in the presentation. This is Emily, the high school intervention specialist. Let's see how she interacts with this room. First, Emily enters her classroom and goes to her desk where she is able to see the entire classroom. Next, she goes over to the sensory room to check that one of her students is doing well. On her way back to her desk, she stops by the printer station and collects an assignment for one of her students that needs colored paper for a lower contrast. Let's revisit Colin, the intervention student with central auditory processing disorder. Colin enters the classroom to take a test for his math class and goes to check in with his intervention specialist. Next, Colin takes a specially printed test to one of the study corrals where he can focus on his work. After completing his test, Colin returns it to his intervention specialist who will send it to be graded by his teacher. Now Colin can go to his next class without the stimulation overload of trying to complete an exam in a noisy classroom. And finally, let's see how this affects Hannah, the intervention student with autism spectrum disorder. Hannah enters the intervention room after a science lab and is overstimulated. She goes to the desk and drops off her backpack. Next, she goes to her intervention specialist and checks that it is okay for her to enter the sensory room. In the sensory room, Hannah grabs one of the sensory rockers and takes a few minutes to rest and refocus. After calming down, she goes back to her desk and works productively for the remainder of her study hall. Noah Christian Academy works well as a case study of the resonance package. But what would the ideal classroom look like? The following room is not based off an existing room. It is free from the constraints of an existing building and is focused on meeting the needs of the students. Here is the floor plan ideation. I was originally going to make the room a higher capacity. In most high schools, 20 to 25 students is the common room capacity. But since it's the ideal room, I ignored these standards and kept the capacity around 12 to 14 students with 1 to 3 intervention specialists. I wanted to add visual interest to the room by incorporating a curved wall, but this proved impractical. I modeled a version of the room with a large curved wall before reality set in. I relented and changed the plan to a rectangular footprint. This is the final floor plan. To achieve the visual interest in organic form, I incorporated the acoustic wall panels mentioned earlier in the presentation. This is the regular classroom area with the teacher's desk. Here is a larger sensory room. Because I made this room larger than the case study, I made room for a lunch area, tutoring area, and a lounge area. Here is the architectural program. The total area is about 2,805 square feet. This is the view one would see walking into the classroom. This is the front of the classroom. Here we see a little lunch area where intervention students can take their lunch rather than going into the very noisy cafeteria. Here we can see the teacher's desk where students can meet with their intervention specialist. Here is the tutoring area where students can meet one-on-one with a tutor to get help with their homework. Here is a lounge area where students can meet up in groups or simply come and read or relax. And finally, we have the larger sensory room. Because this one was larger than the case study, I was able to incorporate another artificial skylight. Aside from that, this has all the same equipment seen in the previous case study room, with sensory furniture and privacy curtains. Here is an isometric view of that classroom. In conclusion, I designed the resonance package for schools to incorporate into their intervention programs to help students with sensory disorders to reach their full potential. We saw this in use for the case study and for the ideal classroom. I will admit that this will not be a great fit for every school, and the truth is that many intervention programs cannot afford this type of overhaul to their classrooms. My contribution to special needs education is a look at what is possible and perhaps the future of accommodating the talented and valued scholars that learn differently. I would like to recognize the people who helped me make this project possible. Carlos Chang, who was my advisor, John Lasco, who helped me with furniture and CAD development, Gabe Pyle, who was my instructor, and Cassie Gabrogi, who gave me resources and much encouragement. The people you see on the right are the people that I interviewed for this project. They are all involved in the special needs education world. They all have a passion for helping those who learn differently, and they all have very long and confusing titles. But I am very thankful to Rachel Kennedy, Catherine Farrell, Dr. Lynn Roper, Dr. David Leach, Sarah Babbert, Cole Dunlevy, Amanda Hawk, and Carrie Lee. Thank you for watching my capstone presentation, Resonance, a Classroom Architecture Project.